Singwaskapeni mama, singwaskapeni, pase mama hala, wanombai mbai wanopatula. Singwaskapeni mama, singwaskapeni, pase mama hala, wanombai mbai wanopatula.
In South Africa, about 40 to 50% of people will have latent tuberculosis, where they have the TB bacillus or the TB germ lodged somewhere in their lungs, but it's quiet, it's not causing any disease, and it's really sitting there waiting for some sort of suppression in the immune system when it would become active again.
TB is a massive problem in the developing world. There are many, many millions of people who suffer from TB. People are dying of TB, and it's causing a tremendous amount of suffering. Why do we still have it? Well, the poor are getting poorer and the rich are getting richer, so the conditions for the spread and the development of TB are still there. But factor number one has to be HIV infection, because it destroys their natural immunity, so that people are more susceptible to get TB when other people cough the germ near them.
At most hospitals in this country, a lot of the case load that they admit will be patients with tuberculosis and HIV co-infection. And it's estimated that about 80% of patients admitted at this hospital here will be HIV infected. 80% of patients admitted with tuberculosis will be HIV infected. And generally, of all tuberculosis cases, about 60% of them are HIV infected. Tuberculosis and HIV are really two sides of the same coin. And until there's an effective containment of HIV, either in preventing new infections or ensuring that people who are HIV infected do not get tuberculosis in the first place, then I don't see that we're going to see any decline in the number of new infections. In fact, I think in South Africa we'll continue to see increasing new infections of tuberculosis.
The country is at the stage that South Africa is now reaching rapidly, of having had the epidemic of HIV for 8-10 more years. A huge number of people have TB. And our hospitals are full of very ill patients with TB, most of whom are HIV infected. 1 in 3 people in the world are infected with TB. Now, infection doesn't necessarily mean disease. Infection just means that the organism has entered the body and may or may not have caused some illness, usually a minor illness. But they are infected. They have been exposed and invaded by the organism, which lies latent in the body.
It doesn't appear that there's a huge amount of interest from pharmaceutical companies in identifying new TB drugs. The big concern about pharmaceutical companies is that I think in the last 30 years there's only been one new TB drug registered. Now, if you compare that to HIV, where in the last 25 years, I guess there have been probably about 20 new antiretrovirals registered. It's quite an indictment of the tuberculosis, of the drug companies in producing new tuberculosis treatments. Possibly India, where they have an enormous tuberculosis problem, although the HIV problem is markedly smaller than ours. I think that these are issues that should concern governments in sub-Saharan African countries and possibly India and China.
TB doesn't grab the attention of politicians or of capitalists because they're not exposed to it themselves. I think our own politicians in South Africa are much more aware than the previous ones were. Nelson Mandela himself suffered from TB. Archbishop Tutu himself had TB. And they have done a tremendous amount to enlighten people and destigmatize the disease.
Diagnosing tuberculosis is extremely difficult, particularly in people who are HIV infected. And the methods that we're using to diagnose tuberculosis in most people are similar to methods that were first discovered back in the 1890s, I think. The second thing is obviously getting new drugs. So once we've diagnosed people, we should be able to treat them in a better manner. The third thing would be to somehow contain HIV. And without doing that, as I said before, I don't think we're going to win the war on tuberculosis without some huge technological strides ahead.
Singwaska penny mama, singwaska penny, pasema mahala, wano my, wano patula. Singwaska penny mama, singwaska penny, pasema mahala, wano my, wano patula. Wano my, wano patula. Wano my, wano